All right, good afternoon. This is myself, Gabe Montalbano, and Trenton Newell, and we are presenting our presentation where we predicted the NCAA's men's basketball national champion using a set of data. Excuse me.
Okay, so these are the main questions that we wanted to solve through this presentation and through the project. So after we found our data set, and that data set contained the records for every college basketball team in D1 NCAA men's basketball from the years 2013 to 2021. And we decided that we were going to ask these questions. How effectively does win percentage predict national champion? How effectively does adjusted offensive efficiency predict it? How effectively does adjusted defensive efficiency predict it? How effectively does power rating predict it? How effectively does field goal percentage predict it? And of these five metrics, which one is most effective overall in predicting the national champion? And you may be asking, like, why would we want to study this? And the purpose of that is mainly just to give more informed decisions for the people who have stakes in the college basketball realm. That may just be you and your friends who want to make brackets and you just want to have the best one out there. And you're wanting to look at the various metrics such as win percentage, power rating, field goal percentage. All these things are all indicative of a good team when they have a high rating. But of these, you have to kind of weigh out the which one is going to be the most effective. And from these questions, we hope to answer that. And as well as sports betting or even the coaches for the teams, they'd like to see these metrics and it would help them know what areas they're lacking in and just what things the best teams, the teams who are winning national championships, are high in, such as adjusted offensive efficiency, win percentage, so on.
And we wanted to know how we could organize our large data set and answer, these such large questions because this is for multiple teams over, so many years. And we decided to go with Tableau, which is a data management and visualization software. It allows people to connect, as it says on its own website, allows users to connect, visualize, and share data in a unique manner. And Tableau is great because it lets you make these dashboards and visualizations, as you'll see later on. We decided to use Tableau as it made it easy to combine the data for the years 2013 through 2021 for all of our data, which made it really easy to then make other calculated fields, as you'll see later, that make it much, much easier for us to analyze this data and actually create these predictors.
And just to interject real quick, our data set was very large. Of those 2013 to 2021 seasons, there were 24 columns and over 2,400 lines of data. So with each of that, there's a lot to study, a lot to break down, more than you could just do by reading the CSV file. So Tableau came in handy because it allowed us to visualize this in a really easy to digest way.
Of course, and Tableau is used around the world, so people know how to break down the math that is used within it and its software and know how to read what it puts out. In our data set, as we've talked about, it covers like all of NCAA's Division I men's basketball records for the set period that we have talked about. For every season, the various stats are recorded on a team-by-team basis, so we're able to analyze individually as well as on a master basis or a meta basis.
All right. So the first one that we'll talk about is win percentage as a predictor of national champions. And this was the first of the five questions we set out to answer of individual metrics about how they are indicative of performance in the NCAA tournament, also known as March Madness. So as you can see on the right, that's the chart we made. It shows the correlation between tournament performance and win percentage. So the equation's right there on the left. So you can read that. That's kind of how the calculation was done. But as a predictor, it's used to gauge a team's overall performance and success in terms of wins, which some is considered an important factor in determining a national champion for its respective year. And we actually had to calculate win percentage before we could go at making this data visualization chart because the format that our CSV file came in, it just had games played and number of wins. So we had to make a calculated field, and we did that by dividing games won over games played for each team for each individual year, which allowed us to put this together. But as you can see on the right through our chart, the R squared is 0.307, which is pretty high. And this is a model for the tournament performance. And it's definitely significant, as you can see right there. But we'll see how this compares to the rest of our metrics.
And compared to some of the other metrics, win percentage is a more simple one, even though we had to make the calculated field. So for it to have such a high R squared is a great indication for the first one that we went over. Next, we have our adjusted offensive efficiency as a predictor of national champion. As you can see, the equation that'll be present throughout for the remainder of all of these factors that we analyzed. But what is adjusted offensive efficiency? It's a statistic that measures the efficiency of a team's offensive performance against the strength of the opposite team's defenses. It's calculated as the number of points the team scores in a given game or within a season per 100 possessions, adjusted for the strength of the opponents they face. So it kind of helps, I guess, keep it a little more even because the opponents they face and then their own strength is factored all into that. And of course, as you can see, it has a very high R squared as well with 0.331. And as also you can see with the trend, it follows the trend very closely. National champions are more likely to have a higher adjusted offensive efficiency.
And I'll add real quick, adjusted offensive efficiency. The fact that it's adjusted means it's adjusted for strength of schedule, because some teams play in a conference where they're not playing top high-end D1 teams. There's a difference between your schools like App State and Duke or Kentucky, NC State, or not NC State, UNC, other teams that just are in the power conferences, the ones where they're playing just higher level teams with bigger programs. And this adjusted rating helps to take that into account so that it can be more accurate at predicting the teams, because otherwise you could have some really good teams for lesser divisions end up looking like they're really good on paper, and then they get put in the tournament and they just don't do very well at all.
Right. And next is our adjusted defensive efficiency. So it's going to be essentially just the opposite of the last one when it comes to how it's calculated. And same goes for the trend line. It's a little bit lower for the R squared at 0.267, but it trends down, but it still follows our general idea that it is a predictor. And moving on to the next one.
Okay, so the next one is power rating as a predictor of national champion. So the equation is very similar to the other one, but the power rating overall measures a team's overall strength based on factors like team performance, strength of schedule, margin of victory, and it takes into account win-loss record, strength of opponents, and how they performed against them. And this measure is actually pretty significant. As you can see, the R squared is 0.336, which is very high compared to some of the others, which means it is very effective in predicting national champion. We'll have to see how it stacks up against the rest at the end, though.
Next, we have our field goal percentage as a predictor. And what is field goal percentage? It represents the percentage of the successful field goals made by a team against the total number of attempted field goals. So that's also a more simple metric, similar to like win percentage, but of course with different stats. And you can see the R squared for it's actually fairly low. It's especially low compared to some of the other ones we have seen at 0.12. And while it still is a significant factor, it is very much less significant than some of the other ones we have analyzed.
And this can also be accounted for because there's teams who play in lesser conferences, lower conferences, who maybe perform well in terms of field goal percentage. But when it stacks up against the top teams, this isn't adjusted for that. So this isn't very effective only because lower teams could have a really good field goal percentage, but they're playing up against bad defenses because they play in a bad conference. So it's not super correlated, but moving on.